Okay. Right, just give it. Right, I'll make a start. So morning, morning Sophie, and welcome Paul and welcome Sarah. I'm going to introduce Sarah in a few minutes, but it's just to kind of welcome you to the webinar, which is Power to Play from the Power to Play report within Alliance for Children and the University of Winchester. Before I introduce Sarah, I just wanted to introduce the CEO of the Alliance for Children, Paul Wright. So just welcome you, Paul, into the meeting.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Yeah, it's great to be here, and there's a lot going on with the Alliance for Children at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, play, of course, has been such an issue for us over the last 18 months and continues to be politically. So, yeah, we're in great kind of position at the moment to take things forward. So thank you, Sarah, for being part of the webinar. And, of course, thank you, Amanda, for placing all the good work in that makes this work.
Thanks, Paul. What we wanted to do this morning is just kind of make some links similar to how we did in the previous webinar, which was really thinking about the report, the Power to Play report that we developed and came out last June. And one of the things that I wanted to really sort of think about in the report is section 1 today, which is really about play in its entirety. So I'm going to read a small snippet from the report and then I'd like to pass it over to Sarah. So when we think about play, we're creating environments that support play as being essential for all children. This means promoting safe, welcoming spaces where children can express themselves freely and feel a sense of belonging. And by reflecting on what we mean by this, I developed in 2024 a principled person-centered approach, which was a model of practice. An acronym CRIB, Connecting Principles with Everyday Practice, for those working with the youngest communities, both in the home and within professional contexts. And thinking about this, a person-centered approach includes a framework to reflect on emotional relationships, meeting emotional and social needs, space to communicate together, and work creatively together to support well-being. For infants and young children to thrive and have positive outcomes, unconditional acceptance to grow a healthy self-concept is, as we know, essential. This can be achieved by adults supporting and co-regulating children's feelings. By being authentic and accepting children for who they are is at the heart of a person-centered approach. And I'm sure Sarah will talk a little bit more about this. With the adults supporting and facilitating opportunities for children in their care to thrive. So in terms of developing the model for practice, it was created as a visual way of placing the children at the heart of the person-centered approach. The model aids a consideration about how care can both be from a feelings perspective as well as a thinking perspective when engaging in play with the children. And that was part of section 2, page 19 of the Power to Play report. And just to kind of finish off, by acknowledging the power of play across disciplines is to connect play concepts and understandings from different areas of study, including research and concepts of play from psychology, sociology, anthropology, history, through to science, neuroscience, and philosophy perspectives and theory, and consider how they relate to each other rather than just focusing solely on one perspective. And that's where I'd like to introduce Sarah. So we are delighted that Sarah, a registered, qualified and hugely experienced play therapist, will be joining us today. Sarah started her training with the Academy of Play and Child Psychotherapy, which is the largest, most experienced and dedicated creative arts and play therapy training organisation in the world. And this was in 2008. Since then, Sarah has delivered over 25,000 play therapy sessions and supported over 500 families in her private practice. Sarah has spoken at the Houses of Parliament, at the APPG under the topic of a fit and healthy childhood, published 2 award-winning therapeutic stories for children, one around how love grows when a second baby arrives in a family, and the second around the words we associate with death and how these can confuse children. Sarah has also recorded 2 podcasts supporting both parents and carers and professional and volunteers. Sarah is also chair of the Child Mental Health Charter Committee, sponsored by Play Therapy UK, which is a team of Play Therapy UK passionate play therapists who champion a campaign for expert, early and effective therapeutic mental health services for children. More recently, Sarah has launched an online shop promoting play therapy gifts for professionals. So welcome, Sarah. And today she'll be talking about play therapy, what it actually is, dispelling any myths that may surround this incredible profession, which is close to my heart as well. She will also share how the healing works and lastly, answer any questions that you may have. So welcome everybody this morning and welcome, Sarah. Really, really looking forward to this. And over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Amanda. Wow, what a lovely introduction. Thank you very much. And hi to Paul and everybody on the meeting as well. So you've heard my name, Sarah Bentley, and I'm an MA qualified and registered play therapist. And that's actually quite important. And we'll come to that a bit later. So as you've just heard, I started my play therapy journey back in 2008. Gracious, it only feels like yesterday in some ways. But before I started, I worked for Jenny Moseley. Many of you will know who is the founder of the quality circle time model in schools. And when I worked for Jenny, I travelled the world promoting the importance of self-esteem. Before that, I worked in early years, and I was also a nanny and an au pair in Saint-Tropez in Paris. In my youth, I'd been a girl guide. I found school really tricky, and guides was an escapism for me. I was also a brownie too. But it was when, at the age of 14, that I took my own patrol to camp with no adults, that I first realised how different we all are as humans and how some of us need more help and support with some things than others. So as you heard, I started my training and it was the best decision I ever made, although of course I didn't know that at the time. I had 2 small children under 5, was working full-time and had poorly relatives, but somehow I soldiered on and I first gained my certificate and became a therapeutic play practitioner and then a play therapist when I gained my diploma. And in 2014, at the age of 49, I graduated from Canterbury University with an MA. Wow. My MA was about, can play therapy support children who have a tricky relationship with food? And the answer was a resounding yes. You heard from Amanda that I trained with APAC, the Academy of Play and Child Psychotherapy, and then I'm registered with Play Therapy UK, who are the largest and most progressive play therapy organisation in the UK. Play Therapy UK is the accreditor for all APAC courses. So PT UK is governed by the PSA, which is the Professional Standards Authority, but this is voluntary, and I will come back to that later in my presentation as well. So, what is play therapy? I thought I would take some time to differentiate and clarify all the terminologies. Here on the screen you can see the play therapy continuum. It starts on the left-hand side and moves towards the right, the higher the need of the child. I hope you can see the words on the bottom in red for clarity too. So, definition of play. Our definition is a physical or mental leisure activity that is undertaken purely for enjoyment or amusement and has no other objective. There are other areas of human activity that may also be defined in this way, hence the need for contextual elaboration. So let's look at some definitions. The term play work is often associated with play worker. We can see play work as an activity that uses play to engage children safely. The objectives of play work are not necessarily therapeutic, although there may be some therapeutic benefit. That may occur as a secondary effect. The role of the provider is one of care and support. Play workers do not normally receive or need clinical supervision. Another example, if the difference is the use of games. Normally in play work, games are played where rules are applied. In therapeutic play, the child may make up, use and change the rules. Play work may also be used in nursery or primary schools to assist the educational process. So the definition of therapeutic play. Therapeutic play can only be used for slight to mild moderate concerns. The registered title is Certified Practitioner in Therapeutic Play. And these professionals have to have clinical supervision and abide by the standards of the Professional Standards Authority that I mentioned just now. Therapeutic play may also be used as a method of detecting more serious problems that may be dealt with by referring on to a child play therapist or psychotherapist or other qualified mental health specialist. A therapeutic relationship is established, and because there is a degree of clinical responsibility, clinical supervision is essential. Therapeutic play has a valuable function in preventing slight or mild problems becoming worse, the recognised qualification being a certificate in therapeutic play. Then we move on to play therapy. Play therapy can sometimes be confused with a play specialist. A play specialist is those amazing people who work in hospitals to help children when they're undergoing procedures or treatments. Play therapy is very different. It uses a variety of play and creative arts techniques, the play therapy toolkit we refer to this, and it's there to alleviate chronic, mild and moderate psychological and emotional conditions in children that are causing concerns and are preventing children from realising their full potential. The play therapist works integratively using a wide range of play and creative art techniques, mostly responding to the child's wishes. This distinguishes play therapy from more specialised therapists. The greater depth of skill and experience distinguishes the play therapist from those using therapeutic play skills. And in order to become a PTUK certified play therapist, a minimum of 200 hours of supervised clinical work is required whilst training. The play therapist forms a short to medium term therapeutic relationship and often works systemically, taking into account and perhaps dealing with the social environment of the client, perhaps their peers, siblings, families, school, etc. Clinical supervision is essential. I honestly could not have functioned without the high quality supervision that I've experienced in my whole career. Play therapy may be non-directive, where the child decides what to do in a session within their safe boundaries. We'll come to Virginia Axline's rules shortly. So play therapy is particularly effective when children who cannot or do not want to talk about their problems. Training to become a PTUK therapist requires the completion of the certificate and diploma. So I've put up here the roles, routes and responsibilities, which was created with the Alliance for Children, formerly the Children's Alliance. Of course, Paul and Amanda are part of that. And it was created with Kathy, who is a PTUK therapist and also part of the Child Mental Health Charter. It's absolutely brilliant and is available online. And this is only a snapshot because it's about 4 or 5 pages long. But it's really helpful for professionals and parents too, like the continuum on the previous slide, to see where all therapies sit alongside each other. Really, really useful document. So play therapy was founded by Virginia Axline. And if you haven't, thank you, Paul. So if you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to read Dibs, In Search of Self. I don't want to give too much away, but this was a life-changing read, if ever there was one, for me personally and many, many others. So Virginia Axline published her initial thoughts of non-directive play therapy. I go really goosebumpy each time I see these, because the impact of these principles upon a child's future, when all these align, is life-changing for them. So Virginia Axline's principles. The therapist must develop a warm and friendly relationship with the child. The therapist accepts the child as they are. The therapist establishes a feeling of permission in the relationship so that the child feels free to express their feelings completely. The therapist is alert to recognise the feelings of the child, expressing and reflecting these feelings in a manner that the child gains insight into their behaviour. The therapist maintains a deep respect for the child's ability to solve their problems and gives the child the opportunity to do so. The responsibility to make choices and to institute change is the child's. The therapist does not attempt to direct the child's play conversations in any manner. The child leads the way, the therapist follows. The therapist does not hurry the therapy along. It is a gradual process and must be recognised as such. And lastly, the therapist only establishes those limitations necessary to anchor the therapy to the world of reality and to make the child aware of their responsibility in the relationship. And as I've been reading those, I've got several clients who floated into my mind who have benefited from those words of wisdom. So now I thought it would be useful to try and explain how play therapy works with the brain. So, play therapy strengthens and builds neural pathways in the brain, integrating all areas. Play therapists are trained to take a child's healing to levels they have not been able to access previously. Play therapy taps into the emotional life of a child by activating the same regions of the brain. And play therapy releases the opioids and oxytocin, and the chemicals make children feel much calmer. And that's where the magic, as I'm often told, the magic appears. So, how does play therapy strengthen those neural pathways? How does that happen? So this works by working creatively. Working creatively is powerful and extremely purposeful too. All play therapists have a toolkit, and here are some of the items found in our toolkits. On the top left, you can see me with Mags, who's a puppet. Shh, don't tell anybody. And then the next slide is my music shelf. And I wanted to tell you the story of a child one day who took the tambour, like a drum, about this big in diameter. And I was expecting them, because I come from an early years background, for them to get the beater and start making a noise. But I was quite surprised when they travelled across the playroom to pick up the big jar of hammer beads. And I've always bought hammer beads in bulk. And they picked up the jar of the hammer beads and they took it to where they'd placed the tambour carefully on a small table in the middle of my playroom. As I observed, they poured the whole pot of hammer beads on top of the tambour. It was at this point, when lots had fallen off the sides already, that they went back to the music shelf to pick up the beater. And as they walked back across the room, they raised the beater in their hand above their head. And as they came to the beater, they hit it with the entire force of their body. Those beads travelled the whole width, length, height and breadth of my play therapy room. The child looked at me for reassurance with a smile, and I met their smile, giving them the permission that what they had done was absolutely acceptable. They didn't know that we had 3 hoovers and about 4 dustpan and brushes. The child continued to do that a little bit more, but the purpose for sharing that is that that child, through those Virginia Axe Line principles, was enabled to do that, and the release of that pressure in that child once they'd hit that tambour the first time, it went on to do several more, was incredible. It was a life-changing session for that child. The next picture on the top is Sam. And you can see that Sam didn't want this photo taken in this photo shoot, and that's why he's looking away. The photographer added to the expression, never work with children or animals, to never work with children, animals, or puppets. Whilst training, we were taught about the therapeutic stories and visualizations, and you can see books on the bottom left-hand picture. And also role play and dressing up was incredibly popular. So you can see my whole rack of dressing up clothes, some were characters like Frozen, and some were things like suits or just dresses and shoes for the children to choose. And lastly, the symbols representing death were also highly used in Sam's. On the next slide, you can see water play, and then what my young people used to call my imagination station, where the den on the left-hand side was somewhere really powerful. And at one point, I had a young person who would come into my playroom and go straight into the den and hide, close those little curtains that you can see and hide. And just on the left of that picture is a bean bag. And I would just sit on the left-hand side quietly and just share in a very quiet voice that I was here in case I could be of any help. And I wondered whether they would like me to pass anything into the den. And after a few moments, they said, "Sarah, please, can you get me some felt pens and paper?" So I went over to the art side of the room and passed in papers and pens. When the session finished, the young person put their creation straight into their box, which we don't look at unless we're invited to do so. So that went straight in there, and the young person, again, a different person to the one I've described earlier, had a lovely life-changing session where it was okay to go into the den. They were not encouraged to come out, but were encouraged to feel comfortable from within. So from there, I have got some images of sand, and I'm going to be really honest with you. These sand trays I've taken off Google, because the sand tray images I had of my own clients were far too emotional to share publicly, even with their permission. So I decided I'd go to Google and get images of sand. They say that creating your first sand tray is the window to the soul. And I would absolutely 100% back that from my experiences in the playroom. Sand was one of the most used parts of the toolkit, as was the role play area. So we know Albert Einstein's quote, "Play is the highest form of research." And we have seen from the toolkit that we've just been chatting about, but how does that help emotional healing? So let's just reiterate. We know play is a child's natural way of experimenting, learning, rehearsing, and mixing real with fantasy. And in the playroom, that's okay. So when you have a child in the playroom who says, "I went to school on a rocket this morning," our answer would just be, or wouldn't be an answer, we would just acknowledge that comment with no issues whatsoever. So it is an integral part of child development across physical and cognitive domains, and it's a vital part of our lives, whatever our age. And we know that as we're hearing more and more research of using play with people suffering from dementia and in care and residential homes. So using play as the medium to express themselves and what they are experiencing makes sense to children. Children can play what they struggle to say. Children can play to explain their way. Through play, children can discover and rehearse different ways of understanding and coping with difficult feelings, leading to a healthier and happier way of being. Feelings are vital. Recognizing and understanding them is important too. Emotions give us information about what is happening to us so that we can plan what action to take. Tuning into, recognizing and understanding thoughts and feelings is central to play therapy. In a child session, they can make sense of their emotions and so choose what actions to take that will provide healthy growth and development. Rehearsing these skills in the safety of the therapy room support and bolster this growth, paving the way for the child to then put these new strategies into practice in their lives outside of the playroom and their sessions. Now, the therapeutic relationship is hugely important. For me, it is the most important part of the toolkit. And I'm going to share with you about a young man who came to my safe space for the first time. He was just starting an intervention. So school, parents, and everybody was involved. And I used to pride myself that when I met the child, all I knew was their name and possibly their age. And that was it. And I used to introduce myself and just go, "Hi, my name's Sarah. I understand your name." And then we would just start that process right from that first meeting. And on this particular day, the parents had brought this young man to the safe space, my therapeutic play centre that I used to have in Wiltshire. When we got there, the young man didn't want to get out. The safe space was on an industrial estate, something that he hadn't experienced before. So my receptionist, who used to welcome all of my clients, came to me and said, Sarah, he doesn't want to come in. So I went downstairs and just went out, didn't get too close, got down low. He was in the front seat of the car and I said, hello, you must be, and I used his name, would you like a drink? And he looked at me and I said, I've got hot chocolate, squash, whatever. I knew allergies were fine. I'd already checked that out. And he said, I quite like a hot chocolate, but can I have it out here in the car? So we got a hot chocolate made with marshmallows and cream, requested and all checked on allergies. And we took the hot chocolate out to the car and I sat outside just chatting to him for a few moments while he drank it. After a while, I said, so I'm just wondering whether you'd like to pop back next week and perhaps come and see my playroom. And I knew that he liked certain activities, so I told him I had those in my room. Okay, he said, and handed back the cup, and off they went. Now, if I hadn't done that, that young lad would not have come back. Next week, I had a hot chocolate ready for him before he even came in the room, so that I could literally say, there's your hot chocolate. And the hot chocolate was a big part of his transition that he came every week. And he did that for the 2 or so years that he came to therapy. The therapy intervention was huge for him, but that role of the therapist, that first greeting, is absolutely second to none. And you can have the most wonderful toolkit, but the Virginia Axeline's principles and your relationship with your client is absolutely second to all, more important than all of those put together. So, as Play Therapists, we also take part in providing research for Play Therapy UK. So the programme is called Fortuna, and then Play Therapy take all our data that we put in after a child-client session, and it also includes things like SEQ results, referral criteria, etc., obviously date of birth or age, and then Play Therapy UK turn these into research. So we know that from 45,000 records that Play Therapy UK and Play Therapy International, the evidence base from the SDQ result has surpassed that 45,000 now. So that's wonderful, wonderful news. And almost 1 in 5 referrals to Play Therapy UK and Play Therapy International practitioners are at the moment due to anxiety. Very interesting. On average, 75% of these children show improvements to their mental health following play therapy, but this increases to 84% for those with the highest need at the time of referral. And I would say that my own personal figures are slightly higher than those too. So really powerful. And we have that evidence to support what we're saying. So what does a day in the life of Sarah Bentley Play Therapy look like? As you heard in my introduction, I have completed at least 25,000 individual therapy sessions. Gosh, every single one was completely different to all the others. How would you believe that often by 9 o'clock in the morning, well, not often, but on an occasion, I might have been a bank robber by 9 o'clock. By 10 o'clock, I might have used the tambour to hit hammer beads all over the playroom. By lunchtime, I might have been helping make a volcano, where I would have just pulled a huge, great curtain from the charity shop onto the floor to enable the young person to make their volcano from paint, bicarb of soda, baking powder, vinegar, and whatever else goes into making it. So it's incredible how 25,000 sessions, each one was completely individual, even within the own child. And as you heard, that's over 500 families have been supported through my work. Incredible. So you also heard from Amanda say that just after COVID, I published my first 2 podcasts. They're both freely available through my website, and each contains short episodes for either parents and carers or professionals and volunteers to boost the self-esteem of children, as this, of course, is the precursor to any emotional health and wellbeing concerns. I released these so that adults in distress who would often, I would get a phone call from at breaking point, had something safe to implement immediately rather than waiting on a waiting list. and they have been incredibly successful. As I say, freely available on my website. Through all my work, I learned some very strong themes. The first one being how a child reacts when a second or subsequent baby arrives in a family. And so I wrote and had illustrated Mama Bear. Mama Bear is all about how a mother's love grows each time she has a new baby and multiplies rather than divides, which is what children appear to think in my playroom. And here's a little video about my book. I never ever thought I would write anything, let alone something that was published and had won awards. So my second book, as we heard, is around the words we use with death, because actually they totally confuse children. And we as adults don't like to use those D words because they can often evoke huge emotions within us. So over the years, we've thought about words like gone to heaven, become a star, in a better place, gone to sleep, or even kick the bucket. And these words absolutely confuse children. And the reason that baby Bear is sitting by the toilet is because when he experiences death for the first time, all the words from all the kind woodland folk make him feel sick with confusion. And that's why he's by the toilet on the front seat. So to be clear, Mama Bear is suitable for all. Suitable for all. Owl is non-gender specific and absolutely suitable for everybody. But baby Bear is to be used sensitively. It's there to use when a young person experiences death for the first time, to gently and sensitively help them through that. So both books have won Golden Wizard Awards, and Mama Bear was a finalist in her category too. So I also want to introduce you to the Child Mental Health Charter, which is sponsored by Play Therapy UK, of which I am the current chair. And it was formed because, shockingly, emotional health services are not regulated in the UK by law. Anyone can call themselves a therapist, and parents and other professionals are unaware of this. They are also unaware of the range of services as shown on the roles, routes and responsibilities slide right at the very beginning, and of course the continuum. So you know that I went to the House of Parliament to speak and was thrilled to have been invited. So we heard that a team of Play Therapy UK passionate play therapists who form the committee champion and campaign for early, effective and expert child therapeutic mental health services. So why early? Early, as in a child's life, not waiting until adulthood, and early in the process. We don't have to go along the continuum to get the right support. With education and training, we can offer this earlier on in the child's own journey. Effective. We know from that Fortuna data that I shared with you earlier that the research we collate from all PT UK is effective. And expert, as in the Charter is calling for those of us who work at play therapy level to be all level 7 registered therapists on a government website. So whilst the PSA is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's voluntary. So please do feel free to check out the other 6 principles on our website and feel free to sign your support. So if you are looking for professional support for a young person in your life, whether personally or professional, you are looking to see if that therapist is on the Professional Standards Accredited Register, that's their logo. You might also look for a drama or art therapist on the HCPC register. And now some people are also using the BACP register to be registered on too. So it's really important to share that. And those are the logos to be looking out for. So play therapy. My play therapy career has been all of these words and more. I have never, ever looked back. I am proud that I gained my MA at the age of 49. Proud of the statistics I shared earlier. But most importantly, I am so proud of the work that I have done to help children and their families to have a better future. So here I've put all the websites of all the people I've mentioned. So APAC is a training organisation. Play Therapy is the register that we belong to. The Child Mental Health Charter, I've just spotted a typo, so apologies, childmentalhealthcharter.com. And then there's my own website there, so you can find out more about me. So before we open up questions for me to have today, I really wanted to share with you that my last quote, and I hope that I have shared what play therapy actually is and the power that it has to heal. I hope I've shared what the day in the life of a therapist could look like, and I hope I have shared my aim to regulate our vital profession through the Child Mental Health Charter and its work. So I would love to leave you with this quote that I have on mugs and in my playroom and everywhere I work, because for me, this is exactly what play is. And George Bernard Shaw, thank you for sharing this. So we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And I'm now really happy to take any questions. And I'll just close my presentation down so I can see. Thank you very much. Over to you, Amanda.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. It really comes through your passion. And it was just, yeah, it was so helpful, interesting, and insightful. I think just bringing it to life as well through your kind of reflections and your experiences, and with so many sessions, recognizing that everyone is unique as well. And yeah, it was just really helpful. I've written, as usual, quite a lot of different notes, and thinking about particularly where you talked about also being quite ethical in your work, and that came through when you talked about the sand tray as well, and that even if you had permission, it's such a kind of a glimpse, a window into someone's inner self, that actually you felt that it would be better not to kind of share that widely. And I think that's really sums up in a way the kind of the way we work sort of therapeutically in regards to play is being really mindful and ethical, and also respectful as well to children and adults. So I think that was really, really helpful. Um, I think also in terms of building a rapport as well, I think that's like you said, I loved the fact that you called it the imagination station. That was really lovely. But also sort of reflecting on that as well, that you can have as many wonderful things, but actually it's about building those trusting relationships and those supporting relationships, and that building of that rapport can take time. And actually, all those objects and engagement is part of the process, but the relationship is at the core of it. So thank you. I'd like to, I'm going to put on the chat because I'd like to hear from anybody else in terms of questions or any thoughts. So please do pop a question or a comment in the chat, and I'm more than happy to share that. I wonder, as we're waiting, whether you just wanted to expand a little bit on SDQs, Sarah, because I'm quite familiar with them. But I'm just in terms of who completes them, because I know that it's more than one person, and where that comes from. I don't think not anybody would be completing them, but I just wondered if that would be helpful.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah. So SDQ, as soon as I said SDQ and didn't say it in full, I knew I needed to go back. So apologies for using that.
No, that's
So it's a strength and difficulties questionnaire by Goodman. And as play therapists, we use these as our initial and possibly sometimes intermediary and ending statistics. So there's 3 sets. There's a set for a professional to complete, there's a set for parents and carers to complete, and there is a set for the child to complete. So I would give my parent or carer questionnaire to the parents to complete privately. I did not, unless they needed help with it from me, I gave it to them because I wanted them to have that ability to think about it, debate it if they wanted to, and have that time around that. And then, of course, they would send that back to me. If I could get one from professionals, I would. That might be a social worker for a child in care, or it might be a TA or mentor or a class teacher in a school. But the most powerful ones for me were from the children. And whatever age child, and play therapy is generally between the age of 3 to 13. Well, I did sometimes work with a child who was a little bit older, who had perhaps come to me before that age, or perhaps when the trauma had started earlier in life. I would always read the questions to the child. It was never about can they read and what can they do. And I wanted to read it because I wanted to get their initial reaction from the question rather than the words, if that makes sense. And it was their responses that I really valued the most. And I also used, once I'd done my MA, I also used the treehouse person technique as well. So that wasn't even using words, that was using art, and that was incredibly powerful. And that's where some of my own research has come from, although, as we know, PTUK published those. So the SDQs are quite widely known, and I think that's why we use them. But the research that was published is based on the SDQ, or Strength and Difficulties Questionnaire. That's where that comes from. So I hope that's clarified that, and apologies for not saying that in full at the time.
No, I think it's just quite helpful, because I guess that if you're less familiar with it, I think it's because we talk a lot about agency of voice, and we often talk about professionals working together, but actually I think it's really helpful to just acknowledge that not only do professionals complete it, but actually families do, but the children themselves complete it. And like you said, the power in it is actually what do the children, how are they responding to it, and ensuring that their voice is part of the kind of journey, really, in terms of where you're going with it in the sessions. And also, I suppose, on the back of that, or sort of following on from that, have you noticed there's been a shift in recent years in terms of any aspects particularly that have been completed? Just thinking, I guess, around the pandemic as well.
The pandemic obviously changed a lot. We as play therapists were not allowed to do therapy online because there was no research into the safety. And of course, we'll all remember the stories of Zoom and all those things going wrong. However, I was allowed to, so each week in the pandemic, I met with my young person online, but I might read them a story or chat or sing songs or whatever. And a couple of families, I had the whole family listening to a story because what else could they do in the pandemic? So things changed hugely after the pandemic. Getting the young people to come back to the physical room after the pandemic was incredibly hard. It was like going back to the beginning for many clients. But the other thing I did in the pandemic was I sent something in the post to every single client. Now, that might have been how to make a paper aeroplane, or it might have been how to make a mandala. What I quickly realised from the parents and carers' feedback was it didn't actually matter what was in the envelope. As soon as the young person saw my butterfly sticker, that's the emblem of my own business, they knew it was from me. And again, that all they wanted to know was that I'd thought of them. So we sent something for every week of the pandemic. And my goodness me, it was incredible. Stretched my creative brain. But the response, and it was those children who'd engaged in that who came back much more easily. So yes, post-pandemic, we have, as we know, the things we hear in the press about young children who aren't school ready. That's not my sentence. It's not a sentence I'd ever want to use. But when we think about young children who were born in that first wave of lockdown, where their parents and carers had no idea what was going to happen, where children were born who never ever saw a different adult for the first year of their lives, how can we expect those young people who have not had the early years experiences that the children beforehand had? We do need to adapt our practice to accommodate that. And there's such myths around that it's a parent's fault and all those sorts of things. So that's really changed since COVID. And the other thing is the anxiety. Children realised in COVID that you could learn at school and it was really safe and it was really cool, and actually you got way more done. So again, we need to be learning from COVID. It taught us as professionals so much. I'd never read a story to a whole family online before COVID came. I'd never done dancing through the computer before COVID came. And actually, it was incredible. So we could learn so much from COVID in terms of children's emotional health and well-being. And I promote that in all my meetings still. And I say, we can't forget COVID. We can't forget what it did for this generation of children. And I don't just mean the ones starting school or in year one now. I mean the children who were 16 and didn't take a GCSE. I mean the ones who were transitioned to secondary school and now never go back. So it did hit every age range across our whole human level. So that for me is huge.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I would echo all of what you said. And I think it's what have we learned from it? What did we do differently? And I think it was really touching as well when you said about, even though we were kind of working through a digital landscape during the time, that actually they still really loved the physical letter in the post.
Yes.
And isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That sort of came through. So I think, I mean, it's not about blaming. And I think it's about learning and understanding and looking through child development and family relationships through alternative lenses that perhaps we maybe didn't do before. So I think there's something really in there about what you said.
There was one little boy, if I can just share, Amanda, who I met online. So, and the rule was that a parent or carer had to be in the vicinity. It wasn't therapy. They had to be around. And if they were in a public room, so the dad would put the young lad, he was about 7 at the time, on the screen. And I don't know whether it still happens, but at the end of the session, story, whatever we'd done, and when they closed the meeting, some stars would come up. And I think it was about the quality of the call. But apparently the dad told me when they finished coming to therapy that every week the little lad would give me 5 stars for, even though it wasn't for me, but he would click the 5 stars. And I think I also want to just talk about ending therapy, because I just mentioned that. Ending therapy is the most important part of therapy. Doesn't matter, okay, starting obviously, but ending, that ending view. So all my clients, when they leave me, there's a whole leaflet and a whole transition. They all know, they all count down, they all plan their last session, which often revolves around, cake and breakfasts and hot chocolates and those sorts of things, and sharing something, perhaps choosing something to take from the room. What do they want to happen to all the things that they've made? So it's a long process. But then on their last day, when they leave and they've had an amazing time, the first birthday after they finish coming to therapy and the first Christmas, they get a birthday card and a Christmas card from me. Because I'm coming to the end of that intervention as a therapist and I've got clinical supervision to support me, they don't have that. So it's really important that they know that on their next birthday, well, they don't know obviously beforehand, but Sarah sends a birthday card or a Christmas card. And then they're always invited back to pop back about between 3 and 6 months after the intervention's closed, to pop back and see. And they would come into the safe space and they'd go, got no new toys then? Or got a small in here, isn't it? And then that was the ending, handled professionally and superbly, and then they would go off and wave goodbye, and that was really powerful. So yeah, so the ending of therapy is really important, and you can't just put in a temporary therapist unless it's been planned, or like you can a supply teacher, for example, because that relationship is what counts. If you're poorly, it's better to say you're poorly and you can't come, and you look forward to seeing them next week, than it is you can't put somebody else in. So yes, that relationship and that ending is absolutely vital.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because we talked about, and I've mentioned about rapport building, but actually preparing for endings is so, so important. It's as important as those beginning relationships, because it is about transitioning and transitioning out, and really having those open conversations. And I think, like you said, that uniqueness of, you wouldn't keep changing the times and the location. You wouldn't keep having somebody kind of coming in and replacing you, and that would be okay. It's a very unique relationship, and it's important to respect that. And I think the time, like you said, the preparation for ending is really important. But I love the fact that you said about also that open opportunity of them being able to come back in a few months, because I think sometimes it's quite severed, isn't it, of like, oh gosh, and for a young child that can be quite a lot to bear. And to be able to come back and then to look around the room and sort of think, oh, it's not quite as, but the size always changes. I love that. And like you said, the kind of like, oh, okay, it's here, it's kind of how I remember, but not quite. And actually there's a real emotional kind of connection within the child then, and a shift within the child. So that's really, yeah, really lovely to hear. And it kind of supports what Fran says, which is, hi Sarah, as a fellow play therapist, just wanted to say thank you for sharing our wonderful profession. So that's
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah, that's a lovely thing to see. And Sophie has put a comment as well, so I'll just kind of read that out for you, Sarah. Going off Amanda's point as well, with the importance behind building warm, accepting relationships with a child is such an important aspect within play therapy, but also in early years as a whole. And I really hope practitioners can realise just how important this can be. It's a very important part of my way of being as a practitioner. Thank you for such a wonderful insight into everything. And I think, and I wonder if you could comment on this, Sarah, because one of the things that I've been really passionate about is thinking about clinical practice, and thinking about taking clinical practice into early years educational settings, and very much not saying that mimic or mirror play therapist or psychotherapist role, because that is specialist training and that is a specialist service. But actually there are principles of a therapeutic play, and there's a principles that I think could be taking it into early years education. And one of the rationales for why I wrote person-centered approach to early years practice was really basically was saying what Sophie was saying, was like, we just don't have that in the early years educational training. It's just, there's a kind of a chip at therapeutic play, and a kind of a relation to emotional well-being. But actually there's some real core principles that would be really helpful beyond the clinical kind of setting for all children. And that was part of a huge motivation to why I wrote what I wrote. And just kind of thinking about that, what are your thoughts in terms of thinking
I
around
totally
that?
agree, and I had been very fortunate. I had, as I said in my presentation, I'd worked for Jenny Mosley, who wrote the quality circle time model. And I ended up working for Jenny because I had used her work when I was working in early years. And I know that sometimes circle time is in today's world thought of as, the weather and the day. But actually the quality circle time model that Jenny wrote with its 5 steps is actually much more about that promotion of self-esteem and the understanding of feelings, and the way that you can role model all those things within an early years setting. And indeed I have done that through, obviously, her training materials. So I think that's really important. But I do think some of Virginia Axline's principles are transferable into early years and primary school and schools generally, if I'm honest. And I guess that's what comes through in my podcast. So one of my episodes of my podcast for professionals is, if you want to tell a child off because their shirt's hanging out, which we know happens in secondary schools, perhaps we could go, oh, hi, Sarah, how are you? How's your day? Can you tuck your shirt in, please? Because you're going to get told off. So I think connection before correction, I think that's really powerful. I do think that transition, children move through early years settings and they go up to a different class or group or whatever it's called. But I think that's really important that we do handle those, because when children come to me for therapy, you can sense a bereavement in nearly every child. Now, that bereavement doesn't have to be a physical death. So one child, so I was practicing in Wiltshire, which is really forces heavy, really, really dominant of the British forces. And one child came to me because what I didn't know before I was working in that environment was a whole battalion of children could disappear overnight when that battalion went to be posted somewhere else. And those children who were not forces, their friend might have gone. And the other parents might not have been informed that a whole battalion was going, because another whole battalion was coming in. So the numbers were all the same. There was nothing to really share until you got used to it. And this particular young girl that I'm thinking of really struggled with that. And the bereavement was there was no ending to those children going. There was no thought for her. But I even had children tell me that they had missed a teacher. So when they had been with a teacher and they'd gone from, let's say, year 3 to 4, but obviously other year groups are available, and perhaps that teacher left the school and how bereft they felt. And another young person came to tell me that there had been another young person in their class who looking in had had some additional needs of their own, and that child would often disappear in the day, I was told, and nobody had told the rest of the class that the little person had gone home to be safe. And that the child coming to me spent the whole day with the anxiety of, where were they? Were they safe? Who had them? Had they had lunch? Did they get a drink? Had they been to the loo? And it's just so we can put in all these things. That's not play therapy as such. That's what came out in therapy over such a long period of time. But if we can be mindful as a class teacher to say to the class, oh, Sarah's not in today. I understand she's poorly. She's at home safely with her mummy, daddy, foster carer, whoever it is, that will just alleviate that anxiety from the children. And if somebody's leaving to transfer schools or moving house, that we do take that time to say goodbye and let the rest of the children know. So we can do those. That's not play therapy per se. We can do that and bring that good practice into our early years and into our schools.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it feels like another webinar of loss and bereavement, but
I would be happy to.
I feel like there's so much to unpack there in terms of transitions, but that loss and bereavement, I think, metaphorically as well as physical, is so important and inevitable throughout our life, but how we support that with young children is crucial. And I appreciate we're coming to the end. I also love the example you gave in terms of those transferable skills, and also the mention of Jenny Mosley, because I do know Jenny interestingly as well. So I was fortunate, she was one of my tutors, and it fantastic work. And when you look at her, she's a drama therapist by originally, wasn't she? It's worth having a look there as well, because these are principles that we can take and learn from, and understand children in a much deeper way than perhaps our kind of initial training as educators will provide. So yeah, wonderful. I've just got Kath to say thank you, Sarah, so much for a wonderful and informative session, so much food for thought. And I think that thanks, Kath, and I think that really brings us to the end of this morning, and I just want to say a really big heartfelt thank you, Sarah, for a wonderful webinar with so much to sort of think about and reflect on, and a real insight into the everyday as well. I think that was really wonderful, and certainly I'm going to be looking at the stories as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to work with you all, and if I can help with anything. Bereavement has always been one of my special topics that I've always realised, hence the books. So I'd be really happy to help with anything like that. I think so yes, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much indeed for inviting me.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. And thank you everybody for attending as well. We're really grateful, and thank you for your comments too. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.